After 3 straight months working on a cargo route between Earth and the outer colonies, all I wanted was a hot shower, my own bed, and at least 12 uninterrupted hours of sleep. My return shuttle landed just before sunset, and by the time I dragged my luggage down the familiar street, I was already imagining the comfort waiting for me inside the family house. Instead, I found a brand new lock hanging from the front door. I stopped, looked at the lock, looked at the house, then looked at the lock again. For a moment, I honestly wondered if I'd walked to the wrong address. Then I noticed a note taped directly in the center of the door. It wasn't a small note either. It was 3 pages long. That should have been my first warning. I unfolded the pages and immediately recognized my sister's handwriting. Nice try. That was the first sentence. The second sentence was somehow even stranger. I know what you're planning. By the third paragraph, things had become completely unhinged. According to my sister, I had secretly spent months preparing to sell the family house. She claimed she had uncovered my scheme and taken action before I could destroy our childhood home. I blinked several times. Then I read it again. Apparently, while I was transporting industrial supplies across 3 star systems, she had somehow convinced herself that I was plotting a real estate heist. The letter ended with a dramatic declaration. You are no longer welcome here. I stood there in silence. A curtain moved in the house next door. Then another. Within seconds, half the neighborhood seemed to be watching. Old Mrs. Parker stepped onto her porch carrying a bowl of snacks. Do you need popcorn? She asked. I stared at her. Why do you already have popcorn? She shrugged. The note went up this morning. Of course it did. Across the street, someone was openly recording with their phone. A teenager gave me a sympathetic thumbs up. Another neighbor looked disappointed that I wasn't yelling. I tried calling my sister. Straight to voicemail. I sent a message. No response. I called again. Nothing. Meanwhile, the audience kept growing. At this point, I wasn't even angry. I was too confused to be angry. Eventually, I sat on my suitcase and reread the note for a third time. That's when I noticed the source of the misunderstanding. A cousin had apparently told my sister that I had discussed property values before leaving on my trip. What I had actually said was that I wanted to renovate the garage. Somehow that conversation had evolved into me becoming a criminal mastermind. The whole thing was ridiculous. I could have argued. I could have demanded she open the door. I could have started a family war right there on the front lawn. Instead, a different idea appeared in my mind. A much funnier idea. I opened my tablet. 5 minutes later, I reserved the most luxurious recreational vehicle available within 200 miles. If I couldn't stay in the house, I'd stay somewhere better. As the confirmation appeared on my screen, I looked at the house one final time and smiled. My sister thought she'd won. By tomorrow morning, she was going to discover just how badly she had miscalculated. The next morning, I woke up in a budget motel expecting a normal delivery. What arrived instead looked like a luxury apartment that had somehow decided to become a vehicle. The RV rolled down the street like a celebrity making a grand entrance. It was enormous, polished to a mirror shine, and so advanced that several neighbors walked outside just to stare at it. Even I was impressed. The rental company representative proudly spent 20 minutes showing me features I didn't even know existed. There was a full entertainment system, a gourmet kitchen, climate-controlled furniture, self-cleaning technology, and an outdoor projector capable of turning the side of the RV into a giant movie screen. At one point, I accidentally asked if the thing could fly. The representative looked genuinely disappointed. Not yet. Within an hour of parking directly across from the family house, the RV had become the most popular attraction in the neighborhood. Children rode their bikes past repeatedly. Adults found excuses to walk their dogs nearby. Retired neighbors suddenly developed a strong interest in outdoor socializing. Meanwhile, my sister spent most of the morning peeking through her curtains. I could practically feel her confusion. The plan had clearly been for me to disappear. Instead, I had upgraded. By lunchtime, Mrs. Parker arrived carrying homemade cookies. A few minutes later, another neighbor brought drinks. Someone else contributed snacks. Without anybody officially organizing anything, an impromptu gathering formed around the RV. People sat in folding chairs. Stories were exchanged. Music played softly in the background. Everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. The funniest part was that nobody was discussing my sister. They simply preferred hanging out around the giant luxury vehicle. Every time she looked outside, the crowd appeared larger. By evening, the projector screen was operating. Families gathered with blankets. Children sat on the grass. People laughed together while watching old comedy films. Several delivery drivers stopped by during the week and automatically assumed I was hosting some kind of neighborhood event. One driver even asked if I was the president of the homeowners association. I told him absolutely not. He didn't seem convinced. The RV somehow continued attracting visitors every day. Then something unexpected happened. During one of the evening movie gatherings, I noticed someone standing near the back of the crowd. She was tall, elegant, and definitely not from Earth. Her silver-blue skin reflected the projector light, while subtle patterns moved beneath the surface like living artwork. She watched everything with obvious fascination. Eventually, she approached. "I'm conducting cultural research," she said with a warm smile. "May I ask a question?" "Depends," I replied. "Is it one of the easy questions?" She laughed. The sound immediately caught my attention. Most researchers I'd met across the colonies were serious and formal. She looked genuinely amused. "I heard the owner of this house expelled you." I nodded. "And your response was this?" Her eyes moved toward the massive RV surrounded by happy neighbors. "Pretty much." "You didn't challenge her?" "No." "You didn't argue?" "No." "You didn't seek revenge?" I looked around at the crowd enjoying themselves. "Why would I? This is much more entertaining." For several seconds she simply stared at me. Then she started laughing again. "I think humans may be the strangest species in the galaxy." Over the next hour we talked while the movie played. She explained that she was studying human social behavior for an interspecies cultural exchange program. I explained that my family specialized in creating problems that normal people would never imagine. The conversation flowed effortlessly. By the end of the evening, she was smiling constantly. As she prepared to leave, she glanced once more toward my sister's house. The curtains moved again. My sister was still watching. The alien woman grinned. "Your sister intended to punish you." "Apparently. Instead, she accidentally created the most popular location in the neighborhood." I looked around at the laughter, the food, and the growing crowd. She wasn't wrong. And judging by the expression I could barely see behind those curtains, my sister was finally starting to realize it too. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation somehow became even more ridiculous. What had started as a temporary living arrangement turned into a full-blown neighborhood phenomenon. Every evening, people gathered around the RV. Monday became movie night. Wednesday became barbecue night. Friday somehow evolved into community game night. Nobody knew exactly how these traditions started. They simply appeared naturally. The funniest part was that I never organized any of it. People just kept showing up. Meanwhile, my sister was becoming increasingly desperate to control the narrative. She started telling neighbors that she had acted to protect the family home. Unfortunately for her, everyone had already heard several different versions of the story. And every version sounded crazier than the last. One afternoon, she attempted to hold a neighborhood meeting in her front yard. Apparently she planned to explain her actions and regain public support. The meeting was scheduled for 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock exactly, 3 people attended. One of them was a confused delivery driver. The second was an elderly man who thought free snacks would be available. The third was her friend from work. Meanwhile, more than 30 people were gathered around the RV watching a classic comedy film. When someone informed me about the meeting, I nearly spilled my drink laughing. The alien woman laughed even harder. By then, she had become a regular visitor. What began as casual conversations had gradually turned into something neither of us wanted to admit out loud. She arrived almost every evening. Sometimes we talked for hours after everyone else left. She told me stories about her homeworld. I told her stories about growing up with my sister. According to her, my childhood experiences explained a great deal about my patience. Most species would have started a war by now, she said one evening. We sat beneath the RV's exterior lights while the last guests headed home. A war seems excessive. Your sister literally removed you from your own house. Technically, she removed me from her version of reality. That earned another laugh. I was beginning to realize how much I enjoyed making her laugh. The feeling was apparently mutual. A few nights later, the truth finally started spreading through the neighborhood. The cousin responsible for the original rumor accidentally revealed everything during a barbecue. As it turned out, I had once mentioned increasing property value by renovating the garage. That single comment had somehow transformed into a story about secretly selling the house. The rumor then traveled through several family members before reaching my sister. By the time it reached her, I had apparently become a real estate villain plotting to steal everyone's inheritance. The entire neighborhood found the misunderstanding hilarious. My sister did not. For the first time, people openly questioned her decision. The facts were impossible to ignore. I had never listed the property. Never contacted a buyer. Never discussed selling anything. In fact, I had spent months saving money specifically to improve the house. When that information became public, my sister's position collapsed instantly. That evening she watched from her window as neighbors gathered once again around the RV. The crowd was larger than ever. Children played games. Families shared food. People laughed beneath strings of decorative lights. Standing beside me, the alien woman quietly smiled. "You know," she said, "this may be the most human thing I've ever witnessed." "What is?" "A misunderstanding becomes a disaster. The disaster becomes a joke. The joke becomes a celebration." I considered that. "That does sound like us." She looked at me for several seconds. There was a softness in her expression I hadn't noticed before. Then she handed me a small invitation card. "A community exchange gala is being held next week." I examined it curiously. "It sounds important." "It is." She hesitated. "For cultural reasons, guests usually attend with someone special." I slowly looked up. Her smile widened. "Would you like to go with me?" For perhaps the first time since returning from my work trip, I found myself completely speechless. Across the street, my sister was finally realizing she had lost the battle she started. And standing beside me was someone who somehow made every day brighter. Without hesitation, I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that very much." For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about family drama at all. The community exchange gala turned out to be far more impressive than I expected. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the enormous convention center. Elegant decorations stretched across the hall, music floated through the air, and conversations between different species created a constant hum of activity. I felt slightly underdressed. My date looked completely at ease. The moment we entered together, heads turned. Not because of me. Because she was well known within the cultural exchange program. People greeted her constantly. Researchers, diplomats, and community leaders stopped to speak with her every few minutes. To my surprise, she introduced me proudly to every single one of them. As the evening continued, I noticed something unusual. Several guests had heard about the situation with my sister. Apparently, the story had spread through cultural research networks as an example of unusual human conflict resolution. One alien researcher approached me looking genuinely confused. "You were removed from your residence." "That's correct." "And you responded by creating a social gathering center?" "Also correct." "You did not seek revenge?" I smiled. "Not really." The researcher stared for several seconds. "Humans are terrifying." My date burst out laughing. That answer alone became one of the most popular stories of the evening. Throughout the gala, more visitors approached to hear details. Every time I told the story, people reacted the same way. They expected anger. They expected confrontation. Instead, they got a neighborhood movie club operating out of a luxury RV. By the end of the night, several guests were describing humans as the only species capable of accidentally turning family drama into community entertainment. Honestly, I couldn't argue with that. As the event came to a close, my date and I stepped onto a balcony overlooking the city lights. For a few moments neither of us spoke. Then she gently took my hand. "I've studied humans for years," she said quietly. "But I've never met one quite like you." I smiled. "You clearly haven't met enough humans." "Maybe." She shook her head. "Or maybe patience, kindness, and humor are rarer than you think." For a moment, everything else disappeared. The noise. The crowd. The months of family nonsense. None of it seemed important anymore. What mattered was the person standing beside me. The feeling was clearly mutual. When we returned to the neighborhood later that week, another surprise was waiting. My sister was standing outside the house. No dramatic note. No angry speech. No new locks. Just an exhausted expression. The truth had finally reached everyone. The rumors had been false. The misunderstanding had been entirely her fault. After weeks of defending the impossible, she had finally run out of excuses. "I owe you an apology," she said. For a second I thought I might be dreaming. My sister voluntarily admitting she was wrong was rarer than an interstellar comet. She apologized for believing the rumors. For changing the locks. For refusing to listen. For turning the entire neighborhood into unwilling participants in her paranoia. I accepted the apology immediately. Holding a grudge would have required far more energy than I was willing to spend. Besides, life had worked out surprisingly well. A few days later, the neighborhood held one final gathering. During the celebration, someone unveiled a framed copy of the original eviction note. The crowd erupted with laughter. Even my sister eventually laughed. A little. Very reluctantly. As the evening came to an end, she approached me once more. "So," she asked, glancing toward the house, "are you finally moving back in?" I looked at the family home. Then I looked at the luxury RV. Children were playing nearby. Neighbors were sharing food. Friends were laughing under the lights. And standing beside me was the woman who had completely changed my life. The answer was obvious. I smiled. "Why would I leave?" My sister frowned. I wrapped an arm around my girlfriend's shoulders and looked at the crowd enjoying another perfect evening. Getting kicked out was the best thing that ever happened to me. The neighborhood exploded with laughter. My sister groaned. The framed note immediately became a permanent decoration at every future gathering. And somehow, thanks to one ridiculous misunderstanding, I gained a stronger community, a happier life, and a relationship I never expected to find. Not bad for a guy who came home expecting nothing more than a good night's sleep.